want additional music, theater, and dance, or an art exhibit to pass the class. And we have several upcoming performances in the next week, and I'm just going to share those with you. The ones that are here on campus, the Crucible play is showing tonight, tomorrow, and Saturday right across the hall in the theater. On Monday, we have a jazz combo concert. On Tuesday and Wednesday, a ballroom dance concert, and on Wednesday, a wind ensemble concert. So it'll be a busy week for the arts, so make sure you go and attend some of those. And then a little plug for next week, our convocation speaker will be Sergeant Kevin Briggs. He is also known as the guardian of the Golden Gate Bridge because he was a California Highway Patrol officer who stopped upwards of 200 people from jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge into the San Francisco Bay. And now he goes around the country talking to young people about suicide prevention. So don't miss that. Now, finally, today's program is going to go as follows. A group of our own Snow College veterans will post our nation's colors. They will be followed by a musical number by the Snow College Wind Ensemble. Next, we'll hear a duet by Dakota Wilson and Matthew Struthers, both of whom are students here at the Horn School of Music. Finally, we'll be privileged to hear remarks by our guest speaker, Chief Warrant Officer 5, Don W. Jacobson. And I'll tell you just a little bit about him. Officer Jacobson was raised here in Ephraim. He graduated from Manti High School in 1974. He is a proud Badger. He's a graduate from Snow College and also Utah State University. In 1982, he joined the U.S. Army and was a helicopter pilot and a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division. He then joined the Utah National Guard in 1987 and serves there today. He's been on 3 different combat tours, including 2 in Afghanistan. He is married and has 6 children and is the son of Gwen McGarry, who's a former member of the Snow College Board of Trustees. We're pleased to welcome back one of our own alumni. The title of his remarks will be Why We Fight. Now I'm going to turn the time over to the color guard who will present the colors.
Will the audience please rise? Color guard, post. Color guard, post colors.
The Snow College Wind Ensemble will now play a medley of the service songs. Veterans of each branch of the service are invited to stand when their number is played. And at the very end, we'll play a short rendition of the national anthem. We'll invite the entire audience to stand at that point. The audience may take their seats.
Order, arm.
States Army. The United States Marines. The United States Navy. The United States Coast Guard.
Remy is making a job in Texas. In Terminal
The United States Air Force.
I've been asked to read a statement from Vice President Matthey, the Vice President of Student Support Services. Snow College is proud of our student veterans for their service to our country and are grateful that they have chosen Snow to pursue their educational goals. In an effort to better serve our student veterans and help them network with others who have shared a military experience, we are announcing the effort to create a Student Veterans Club here at Snow College. Any student who has served or is currently serving in the military, the Guard, or the Reserves is invited to join. Interested students should send an email with their contact information to studentvets@snow.edu. A club interest meeting will be announced in the next week or so. Thank you.
Check. Oh, beautiful, for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. America, America, may God thy gold refine, till all success be nobleness, and every gain divine.
Oh, beautiful, for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, thy God may shine on thee, and all thy good be brotherhood, from sea to shining sea.
Is my mic working? Yeah, it is. Good afternoon, citizens of Snow College. I am glad to be here back in one of the places that I love the most. Having grown up in Ephraim, it has a place in my heart that cannot be taken by any other place. I'm grateful to be here and to be able to be home and see my mom. I just want to give you a little more background. I joined the Army in 1982 and went to flight school. And you might ask, why would somebody want to do that? Well, as long as I can remember, I wanted to be a pilot. I want to fly. You ask anybody that knew me as a child or a young man, they all knew that I wanted to be a pilot. And it just so happens that tomorrow is the 40th anniversary of my very first solo flight out at the Ephraim Airport. I learned to fly after I graduated from high school, and tomorrow marks 40 years that I took that first flight by myself. The Army gave me the opportunity to be a pilot, and although I hadn't thought of being a helicopter pilot, that was what was offered to me. I went to flight school in Fort Rucker, Alabama in 1982. And in those days, we were flying helicopters that were fairly simple. Most of them had come from Vietnam, after the war in Vietnam, and they were a lot of fun to fly. The helicopters that our soldiers fly today are very, very complex systems, integrated with computers and data and all sorts of stuff that we didn't have when I was a young pilot. After flight school, I was assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division, which was one of the major divisions that landed on the coast of France in paratroop operations during World War II. And it was a fun place to be. President Reagan was in charge of the country, and we had a lot of money. We got to do a lot of stuff. We got to train hard, and we were always ready to go to where the President asked us to go. In October of 1983, my unit was deployed to a small island in the Caribbean called Grenada. The Cubans had set up an outpost there and had taken medical students hostage, and the Army was called in to rescue those hostages. I was part of that initial invasion in 1982. I had a good time in the Army. I got to do a lot of fun things. I got to throw hand grenades, shoot machine guns, and they gave me the opportunity to go to airborne school, which is paratrooper school, and so they even let me jump out of airplanes. Now here's the catch, folks. They gave me money to do all that. That's the best part. So I had a good experience in the Army. When my time in the Army was finished, I elected to come back to Utah, and I was able to join the National Guard and work as a full-time instructor pilot. The National Guard received the most advanced attack helicopter in the world, the AH-64 Apache, and in 1989 I was able to go to Apache flight school and become an attack helicopter pilot. Before that, I flew OH-58 Aero Scouts, so if you ask me what kind of pilot I am, I'm a scout pilot. And even though I've flown many other things, I'm still just a scout pilot. In 2004, my National Guard unit was deployed to Afghanistan. We left our homes and returned 16 months later after a tour of flying attack helicopters in Afghanistan. I deployed again in 2009, flying Beechcraft King Air electronic surveillance airplanes. These were airplanes that were specifically modified for electronic surveillance. You know, as I was growing up, I thought about people in my family that served in the military. The Vietnam War was the forefront of the news during my time growing up in the 60s and the 70s. And I thought about my family who had been in the military. And I didn't think a lot of people in my family had served until I really sat down to figure it out. My mother told me that my grandfather was drafted for World War I and was put on a train and sent to basic training up at Fort Lewis, Washington. Unfortunately for him, the war ended while he was in basic training, and he was able to go back home, so he didn't have to go overseas. In World War II, my mother's second husband, my stepfather, Wendell McGarry, served as a medic in the United States Army in the Philippines and was captured and served 3.5 years as a prisoner of war. My mother's two brothers served in the military, one in the Air Force and one in the Army. My father had two cousins that served in the Army in in the Korean War era. My mother had two cousins that served in the Army during Vietnam, one of whom lost his life at Vietnam. My brother Reed served in the Army National Guard. My son Joshua is a warrant officer awaiting to go to flight school in January in the Army National Guard. He'll be an Apache pilot when he's finished. My second son Caleb is a crew chief on UH-60 Blackhawks in the Utah Army National Guard. I have a son-in-law who's stationed in Korea in the U.S. Army, and he is a warrant officer, and he is also a pilot flying electronic surveillance in Korea with my daughters and 4 grandkids. And I have a nephew who serves here in Manti in the artillery. So all in all, I guess I do have a lot of people in my family that have served in the military. Now I want to make a disclaimer before I go on. The thoughts and the opinions that are expressed here today are my own and do not necessarily reflect those of the United States Army or the United States of America. The subject of my talk is why we fight. Can anybody tell me the difference between freedom and liberty? Holler it out if you know. Anybody? Okay, I'll tell you then. Liberty is the state of being free within society from oppressive restrictions imposed by authority on one's way of life, behavior, and political views. Freedom is the power or scope to act as one please. Now in America, do we have total freedom, or is there total freedom anywhere? I will answer that to no. There is not total freedom anywhere in the world, because if there were, that would be anarchy. Liberty is living within a set of rules, and freedom is choosing to obey those laws or to not obey those laws. So here in our country, we are a country that is governed by laws. We have the freedom to choose to obey those laws or disobey those laws, but those laws enable us to move about the country. They enable us to pursue our education and to become who we want to become. That's one great thing about America is we have the choice to become who we want to become. And who's responsible for who we become? We, as an individual, have the individual freedom and the responsibility to choose who we will be. And we have to work hard to get to where we want to be. Who would have ever thought that a farm boy from Ephraim, Utah would join the Army and go to Army flight school and become a pilot and spend his whole life flying and having somebody pay him money to do it? I wouldn't have thought of that as a kid. But there's a couple of other individuals that grew up in Ephraim that I know that also went to Army flight school and became pilots in the United States Army. Now, why do we fight? Why do we go overseas to fight? And do we go over to occupy? Do we go over to relieve suffering? President John F. Kennedy said, "Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty." So what that means, citizens of Snow College, is that we have a responsibility to ensure that we maintain the liberty that we have here in the United States. Now, I want to add another reason why I fight. If you'll direct your board to the poster, is we fight for the children. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean the children of Afghanistan, but for the children everywhere. Because if we don't, they could grow up in oppressive places and not have the same opportunities that you all have. I'm sure there's not too many people here that were forced to come to Snow College and are forced to get an education. I would bet that most of you chose to be here, and you're here because you want to be. So here's a group of children from Afghanistan. As a pilot, I didn't have a lot to do with the children because I was flying and I was up above the earth. We also fight for their mothers and for the women of Afghanistan who are second-class citizens. The women of Afghanistan have no rights. They are kept as property. They are traded like cattle, and they have absolutely deplorable conditions. Ladies, would you like to wear that burqa? That's called a burqa. It fully covers the women, and the women cannot go anywhere unaccompanied by a man or a male. They can go out, but they have to have a male, and he can be as young as 5 years old or 6 years old, but he is in charge of her. So that's why we fight. Here's what the women wear in Afghanistan. This is a hospital that was set up by the Egyptians, and it was an opportunity for soldiers to render aid to these women and their children because the medical care is deplorable in Afghanistan. They have a lot of disease there. Tuberculosis is rampant in the country. They have malnutrition. The average life for a woman is 60, and for a man is 59. So if I were to live to be that age, I've only got a year left and I'm gone. Being a soldier doesn't mean necessarily that you're always fighting. It means that you render aid. And on the 24th of December of 2004, my unit had the opportunity to load up a bunch of humanitarian supplies and to put them in that Connex right there. We hooked them to a Chinook helicopter, and we flew all that stuff out to a village called Jegladek. There's all the soldiers that were with us so that we could go out and hand out humanitarian aid. I want to particularly show you what the kids in Afghanistan are like. Look at the difference in hair color. These people are a menagerie of people of the conquering armies that have come through Afghanistan through thousands of years. Very few armies have conquered Afghanistan. Alexander the Great conquered Afghanistan, and the British had some significant victories in the 1800s in Afghanistan, but in the end, they turned the British away. And Genghis Khan also had part of his empire was part of Afghanistan today. And in Afghanistan, in a city called Bamiyan, they are predominantly Buddhist, and they are Mongolian in their nationality. They are not like the other Afghans. They speak their own language in Bamiyan. So you can see red hair, you'll see blue eyes, you'll even see blonde Afghanis. They're not Arabs, they are a people all unto themselves. Their official language is Pashto and Dari, but they also speak Uzbeki, Turkmeni, and many others. So they have an official language, but many people speak different languages. So they are a tribal people. And as being tribal, they like to fight. And that's what they've done for the last 3,000 years, is fight. They'll take on any army, no matter how much superior that army may be, the Afghans will take them on, and a lot of times they'll win. So during this time of presenting humanitarian aid, I learned a lot about these kids. They wear very colorful clothes. They are not educated because girls don't go to school and the boys get a limited amount of school. These two little boys had a disease that was common in Afghanistan. You can see the purple mark on their chin. This is a disease called leishmaniasis, which is a skin disease that is given to you if you're bitten by a sandfly. And a lot of people in the country had this disease, and that purple stuff is medication that the Americans would put on to help treat this disease. And I thought, well, you know, we stay away from these, but one of my pilots, he actually got this disease and had to be treated for it. As we go through these pictures, I want you to notice how well taken care of the boys are and how unkept and how the young girls are not taken care of. Their hair is a mess. Their clothes are not the very best. I want to point out that red-headed kid. And they don't have anything. The poorest person in America has more than most Afghans. They barely have enough clothes to put on their back and barely enough food to eat. Their job is to work every day out in the fields to provide their food and to provide what they need so that they can go take it to market and buy the clothing that they need and all the other things that they need. It was very interesting to talk with these kids, even though they didn't speak my language. They were children, and they craved love and affection. These two little girls just kind of sat by themselves and didn't mix with the other kids. And basically, that's all they had were these shawls to keep them warm. Remember, this is the 24th of December, and where we were at in Afghanistan is similar to the climate we have here. So it was cold that day. And the young girls were the ones who took care of the babies. You rarely saw a young boy having a baby or a man having a baby with him. It was always the young girls. And as we've gone through these pictures, I'd like you to know, I hope you've noticed that there were no women present at this gathering. Only men and children. The women were not allowed to be there. And I asked a police officer who had his young son in his arms, I asked him where his wife was. And he wouldn't talk to me about it. He spoke English, but he wouldn't talk to me about his woman, his wife, anything. It was a forbidden subject. So when we brought out the goodies, then the fun started to happen. And as you can see, these kids could be happy. They play, they laugh, they scream. They're like other kids anywhere else in the world. The only barrier they had was the language. Somebody told a joke there, and they had a translator translate it, and I guess it was funny in their language too, because they did laugh. This little girl's name was Halima. She was born in a village that was out in the wild in Afghanistan. Outside the wire is what we called it. And she had a defect. That's another thing that I saw a lot of was birth defects, as well as war wounds. But this young girl had a birth defect where one of her eyes, the muscle on this side wasn't tight enough, so the eye was always looking toward the nose when she was looking straight, so her eyes didn't track. So what happened was they brought her into an American hospital on Bagram Air Base, and they performed surgery on her and was able to give her sight back so that her eyes tracked. They were able to line her eyes up and make it so that she could see and have somewhat of a normal life in Afghanistan. Her normal is not our normal. And just so you know, the soldier that has her on his shoulders, he had lice when he got home. He had to be deloused. I was only willing to give her a pencil. When time came to hand out stuff, these kids were orderly. They lined up. They knew and understood what it stands to be in line. And then when they got their stuff, they got things that they'd never seen before. This girl was totally enthralled with the things that she got. And not only the kids, but their parents and their grandparents were fascinated. I got to tell you another point that just came to mind during this humanitarian endeavor. When we went to pass out stuff, clothing and food, these people turned into animals. When they saw all this free stuff coming out, I saw men pushed away to get in and grab, and it was like a fight to get this stuff. And it made me a little nervous there for a minute because I thought, we're going to have a riot. And if you remember the photograph of where the women were standing in the blue burqas, the same thing happened there. When they started handing out stuff, those women grabbed the bottom of their burqas and threw them up over their head, and they were grabbing. It was like they had never had anything in their life before. So it really opened up my eyes to understand how fortunate and how blessed we are as Americans to have the basic needs of life. Very few of us lack those needs. Here we go with another young lady with her sibling and carrying the goods. This young lady never seen a package of Oreos before, and I'm not sure if she got sugar overload from it or not, but it was a big surprise for her, and she enjoyed those Oreos, I'm sure. That's one of the helicopters that I flew, and as far as combat experience, I went over there knowing that there might be an opportunity that I would have to pull the trigger and take someone's life. And I grew up believing that life is sacred, and that if at all possible, I would shoot at their equipment and not take their life. I was very, very fortunate to be the cleanup guy. Of all the battles that our unit was engaged in, I was usually the guy that came in when the fighting was all over and escorted the good guys out. There are many times that I flew air cover for the ground soldiers coming out of battles that had taken place in Afghanistan. And I remember one particular time when we were flying on a mission, and we were at a point where we needed to get fuel, and so we flew to the fueling point, and as I'm listening on the radio, a convoy had just left the fire base where we were at, and they were on their way to do their mission. And an improved explosive device had exploded in the road and had blown up the front Humvee and had killed the driver. And they called for air cover because they thought they were taking fire from a sniper in the area. And so we hurried and finished fuel and lifted off and flew to the area and went into a recon by fire mode to try and find the perpetrators of this battle. Well, in a war on terror, we're not fighting an established army. We're fighting individuals. We're fighting cells. And so it takes a lot of resources to root out these cells and to kill these people who would do bodily harm to our soldiers. I was fortunate that I never found the guy and never had to pull the trigger. So I came back from Afghanistan not having to shoot my weapon in anger, which I'm very grateful for. And was it worth it? Yes, it was worth it, because one of the first 4 or 5 missions into Afghanistan, I was in the office, and a young soldier came into my office, and he said, are you Chief Warrant Officer Jacobson? And I said, yes. He said, I would like to thank you because you saved our butts. And I'm thinking back, wow, what's going on here? And I said, tell me the story. Enlighten me. And he was a Special Forces soldier, and they had been in a convoy in a canyon and one of their vehicles broke down. And while they were there trying to repair the vehicle, they could see militants up in the rocks setting up heavy machine guns to start to fire on these guys. When all of a sudden, a UH-60 Black Hawk and an AH-64, which I was flying, flew right down the valley. And this soldier said when they heard these helicopters and saw the Apache, they ran. They dropped their stuff and ran. And then the guys hurried and started to work and got their vehicles fixed. And by the time they were getting it fixed again, the guys were gathering again. And another Apache came right down this same pass and scattered them again. And so without ever having fired a shot, I was able to save American lives, even though I didn't know I was doing it. So I was at the right place at the right time, especially for these soldiers. So in conclusion, I want to encourage all of you. You're at a point in your lives where you can choose to serve others. Before you get out there in the world earning your millions, consider some kind of service, whether it be government service in the diplomatic service. The government needs a lot of people to join the diplomatic service, to go overseas and to be diplomats and negotiate with other people. They need soldiers, Marines, sailors, and airmen. We will always need those. As long as we maintain a standing army, we will need people to serve in the military. I think my time is about up, so I will open it up for questions if anybody has any questions. If they can raise the house lights a little bit. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask me? Go ahead. The Scout, the OH-58, because it was the easiest, and it was the most maneuverable, and it was the funnest. And that was the first helicopter I flew operationally in the 82nd Airborne Division. Go ahead, sir.
What's the greatest satisfaction that you get from serving our country?
The greatest satisfaction, and I was going to leave this to serving, is I had hoped to serve so that my sons wouldn't have to go. That's the greatest satisfaction for me, is me serving in the military so that my sons wouldn't have to go. And I've had a son and a son-in-law who served tours in Afghanistan. And if there are any Vietnam veterans here, I would like to say thank you to you, because you went so I didn't have to go. Any other questions? Okay, should I dismiss them? All right, go to class.